Though I know we're marking 30 years of history for our church today, most of you haven't been affiliated with our church for all that time and probably have little idea of its early history. Understanding the history is important because it can deepen our appreciation for what God has done in the past and give us hope for what He will do in the future for our church. So today and each night this week, I'll be giving a brief glimpse into our church's history. Our church had its beginning in the mind and heart of my husband while he was completing his seminary degree at Bob Jones University. It was during this time that we met, and he shared with me his vision and hope of planting a church in his native Western Canada. On June 3, 1983, we were married, the weekend after he received his seminary degree. We spent the first 2 years of our married life in Greenville, both of us working at Bob Jones University. He in the print shop, and I in the registrar's office. Although we dreamed of planting a church in Western Canada, we didn't know exactly how we'd go about it. The Lord, however, already had a plan. Here in Victoria, an older couple named Foy and Peggy Spivey had been laboring for years to establish a small church, which they named Baraka Bible Church. They were American missionaries, but at this point in their ministry, they were hoping to find a Canadian to pastor the small church they had started in James Bay. Someone put them in touch with my husband, and he came to Victoria to explore the possibility of coming as the pastor of that church. Although this little church had flourished a bit in past years, by this time it had dwindled to a small handful of less than 10 people, including Dirk and Grace Newfield. However, they were all hopeful that this young new pastor and his little family would come breathe new life into this small church. They couldn't promise much in the way of remuneration, $100 a month plus the use of the church's old 15-passenger van. However, what they lacked in financial resources, we more than compensated for with our boundless optimism and a faith that bordered on foolishness. My husband thought if we could somehow come up with enough funds to actually move to Victoria from South Carolina, then he could easily get a job to support our family while at the same time building this little church. My in-laws, who are always happy to help their children, generously offered us $3,000 to allow us to move here. So, in April of 1985, just after Duncan turned 1 year old, we rented a moving van, loaded up all of our earthly possessions, put Duncan in a car seat between us. My husband bid farewell to his much-loved Plymouth Fury, and we began a cross-continental journey that would change our lives. Just a little side note here, but as we collected the pictures for this segment, I noticed something extraordinary that I had forgotten. We only had one friend that helped us load our van, a single guy who was studying missions at Bob Jones University. His name was Brad Fleck. Little did we know then that the church we would plant in Victoria would someday support Brad and his family when they went as missionaries to the Marshall Islands. Well, back to that transcontinental journey. Although I embraced this whole idea of going to Canada to plant a church, when it came to actually leaving all of my extended family, and yes, even my country, behind, well, that was another matter. I jokingly say now that I think I only cried from South Carolina to Illinois. After that, I was okay. Until we got to the USA-Canada border in Blaine, Washington. We had to meet with the immigration officers to go over the stuff we were importing. Yes, all that garage sale furniture and the boxes of still shiny wedding gifts had to be accounted for and valued. But when they told us rather matter-of-factly that we'd need to register Duncan as a Canadian born abroad, well, I choked back tears again as the gravity of changing countries struck me again. To me, Duncan was an immigrant to this country, just like myself. But to them, I was the only immigrant in this family. It was the first of 1,000 times when I would have to learn to think differently, or look at the same set of information from a different point of view. Eventually, of course, we were allowed to cross the border, and for the first of what would be 1,000 times, we raced to catch a ferry. We had a lovely, sunny crossing, and then headed down Highway 17. I distinctly remember coming over a hill on May 4th, 1985, and the city of Victoria suddenly stretched across the whole horizon. I thought to myself, yes, Lord, this is the city we will claim for you. Ah, that boundless and youthful optimism oozing out again. I didn't know then how necessary that optimism would be for our future success in building a work for God here in this city, but time has shown it to be a most valuable commodity. An older couple in the Baraka Church had agreed to let us stay with them until we found our own accommodation and until my husband found a job. Almost a week later, he still had no job, but we did manage to find a townhouse to rent in Esquimalt. Although without a steady job, how we would pay regular rent was uncertain. Nevertheless, we unloaded all that garage sale furniture, returned our moving van, and began the ministry at Baraka Bible Church in James Bay. Over the next few months, it became obvious to us that the handful of people there at Baraka were still mostly loyal to and still following their original pastor, who remained in the church as the song leader. He too, of course, had a very vested interest in this little church, which is natural, of course. He was the founding pastor. We, on the other hand, were the new kid on the block, and we were green and inexperienced. In my husband's words, there were just too many chiefs and not enough Indians. So after much prayer and counsel from various more experienced ministry people from our past, we made the decision to resign from Baraka Bible Church. We bode them no ill will. In fact, we bade them Godspeed, but we didn't think it was prudent for us to continue our ministry there. This was in October, less than 6 months after our arrival in Victoria. We returned to our townhouse in Esquimalt quite discouraged, but also wondering what the Lord would have us do next. My husband pretty much wanted to leave the city entirely, but the Lord had put us in a position where leaving wasn't financially viable. We had no financial resources at all. My husband had gotten odd jobs here and there over the last few months, but nothing that would sustain our little family, and I was now expecting another baby. However, again, God had a plan, but we were unaware of it until one evening there was a knock at our townhouse door. Yesterday I recounted how God brought us to Victoria originally, to Baraka Bible Church, and how God seemingly closed that door of service, and we were left wondering what to do next. Then there was that knock at our townhouse door, which was to be God's answer to that question. There at the door stood our neighbor, Murray Weeb. In the course of my husband's job search over those past few months, he had decided to attempt renewing the real estate license that he had previously held in Alberta. Since we knew our neighbor Murray was a current realtor, my husband had asked Murray about the process for taking out a real estate license. However, tonight, Murray had a different topic on his mind. As my husband opened the door, Murray greeted him with a very curious question. "Don, didn't you come here to pastor a church or something?" My husband replied tentatively, "Well, it's a long story." Unabashed, Murray laughingly said, "I've got lots of time." So we invited him in and began a discussion which quickly turned to the gospel. Murray shared how he had made a decision for Christ at a Billy Graham crusade years ago, but that he hadn't really gone to church or lived much of a Christian life since then. As we talked, the phone rang. It was Murray's wife, Shirley. He told her that we were all talking religion over here. She cheerily replied, "Well, that sounds more interesting than what I'm doing. I'll be right over." Shirley had not heard the gospel before, so eventually she trusted Christ and was baptized. But the significance of this encounter with them was that it appeared to be God's way of cementing our resolve to stay in Victoria. We began a Bible study in our home that Murray, Shirley, and many others began attending, including Mr. and Mrs. Newfield, also their son Drew and some of his friends. As that Bible study grew and flourished, it seemed logical for us to rent a building and begin holding a Sunday service as well. The View Royal Community Hall was just down the street from our townhouse, so that was where our Bible study eventually became Grace Baptist Church. Don's sister Maureen moved from Edmonton and became our church pianist. Initially, we only held a Sunday morning service. Later, we added once a month Sunday evening service, which we entitled Cookie Night, since we would serve cookies after the service for a brief time of fellowship. That's a Baptist church for you, always luring people in with physical food in order to get the opportunity to provide the more important spiritual food. The activities of Grace Baptist Church in those early days were very similar to our church activities today, although then they were on a smaller scale. Our Christmas parties were often in the Newfields basement. Some of our Bible studies were held there as well. The first Thanksgiving dinner I remember was hosted in our little half-duplex. I was so happy to put my wedding china to good use. For the longest time, we were a very small group. Although lots of people came and went during those years, it seemed like the only permanent additions being made to our church were a new Johnson baby every 2 years. However, the Lord was building His church, no matter how slowly it seemed to us. We tried numerous methods of outreach during those days. We went Christmas caroling in the area around the church, and Marlene Bader's parents welcomed us. Following that, Marlene's mom began attending our church, and eventually Bob and Marlene also came. We sent flyers to the area around the church, and Wally Russell paid the church a visit. He was saved and baptized at the age of 75 and often testified how the Lord turned his life around 180 degrees. He and Maureen became the Saturday night setup crew for all the chairs for the service the next day. Wally's military background lent a precision to that process that was truly remarkable. When we arrived Sunday morning, I assure you there was not one chair slightly ajar or out of line. So, the Lord was building His church, but my husband's job and income were still very sporadic, and it seemed obvious to us that we needed more help, both with our income and with the church work. As always, God had a plan for that, and tomorrow we'll look at that segment of our history. We've seen how our little church got its foundation, but also how its long-term survival seemed threatened without some outside support. As we'd done many times in the past, my husband and I sought the counsel and advice of more seasoned ministry people. Most suggested that we join a mission board and seek to raise some regular outside financial support from established churches. My brother, who was at that time a pastor in Michigan, recommended we consider Baptist World Mission, which at that time was headed by Dr. Fred Moritz. We applied to that mission board, and after being accepted as missionaries to Victoria, my husband began making short 3 to 5 week trips to the U.S. several times a year to seek missionary support for our church work here. A couple of years later, we also received hands-on help in the ministry when my husband's brother Paul and his wife Cindy moved from Ohio to Victoria to come alongside us in the work here. Although their help was invaluable when they came, our Sunday school was born, yet God had another plan for them as well. A little Baptist church in Courtenay had been without a pastor for some time, so Paul was supplying that pulpit once a month or so. Through that experience, he felt the call of God to go there and be their permanent pastor. So, after helping us for several years, our little church had the honor of organizing an ordination service for Paul, and afterwards we sent them on their way to build Grace Baptist Church of Courtenay for God's glory. Although their family had been a big part of our little congregation, God brought others, seemingly right away, to fill the hole left by their family's departure. I like to think that was God's assurance to us that we'd done the right thing. Over the next few years, our little church continued to grow. We began a Patch the Pirate singing club for our children, which added a new dimension to our ministry. I wish I had better pictures of that first Christmas cantata that they performed, Peanut Butter Christmas, directed by our own Mr. Burgess and starring Harry and Tony Lloyd. There were also other little Christmas programs, complete with shepherds and angels. And there were parties and youth activities and birthdays and picnics, even a wedding. And yes, as always, the faithful preaching of God's Word. So God brought people to us in response to that faithful preaching, and once again, God moved us to the next stage of our ministry, this time through a phone call. The View Royal Community Hall provided a very convenient and inexpensive location for our church for 14 years. During that time, our church had saved quite a sum of money in a building fund, but real estate in Victoria has always been extremely expensive, so the prospects of our acquiring land and building a real church building were still pretty slim. However, God had a plan, and one day my husband received a phone call from the pastor of Langford Regular Baptist Church. Our children had attended the Awana program held in their building, so the pastor was aware of our church planning effort. He wanted to know if we might be interested in buying their building. Of course we were interested, and as it turned out, they sold it to us for a very reasonable price, basically the land value, and even agreed to carry a second mortgage for us for a year to help us out. What a blessing it has been to have our own building. We moved into our new church home on July 2nd, 2000. To initiate our new building, we held a week of evangelistic meetings with Todd Savinsky. It was during those meetings that Bob Bader trusted Christ as Savior. What a blessing to baptize him and many others over the years. God has provided many special blessings for our church since we've been there. The elementary school provided cement barriers for our parking lot for free to protect their playground fence. A contractor agreed to pay for our church's sewer hookup in exchange for driving his contracting equipment on our property during a construction project. Another church gave us some money that allowed us to pay for a needed new roof on our church. So over and over again, the Lord has blessed us above and beyond whatever we could have imagined. Although this history has been much about our buildings, let us never forget that the church is the people. We are so grateful for each person the Lord has brought to this church and for the contribution each one makes to this church. It truly is a church family. So let's keep on keeping on, caring for one another and reaching out to the lost around us, so that when we stand before the Lord one day, He will have found us faithful.
All right, well, welcome to our 40th anniversary video. This is the update to my wife's earlier 30-year story, which she did 10 years ago. She has a very folksy style, and we had Dr. Fred Moritz come and celebrate with us for the anniversary. God has done wonderful things for us since. However, my style is not folksy, as most of you probably already know. But as we go through this, what I want to do is share a few milestones along the way and talk about what God has used to build our congregation through the years. And there's a lot of stories I could tell at each stage. And in fact, that's why I'm recording this, because I will just ramble if I started clicking through slides, and you'll be here much longer than you would want to be here. When will that guy ever shut up? So let's move now to the slideshow, and I'll stop rambling. Here we go. 40 years by God's grace. So we're actually recording this on August 3rd, the Monday holiday, which is the 40th year exactly from the day our first service was held. It was on August 3rd, 1986, which is the first milestone, of course, first service. So, not a lot to say, but here was the old building we started in, the View Royal Community Hall. This is what it looked like inside. This is from not right from the beginning, because at the beginning we had hardly any people. We, I think, only set up 2 rows of chairs at the very beginning. And this is a little bit later on. And you can see Wally Russell in there setting things up. What a wonderful man he was. All right. And next milestone was incorporation, May 1st, or May 15th, 1987. Now we had 9 members. And the ones that are still members are myself and my wife, Don and Debbie, Maureen Johnson Perry, and Sally Hyssop. Sally is in a care home, but she's still a member, and she was one of our originals. So those are the 3 or the 4 that remain. Some of the others have gone on to be with the Lord. Now, we purchased this church building December 31st, 1998. We had at that time 17 members and an average attendance in 1998 of 33 people. Didn't move into the building right away, and we've made many changes through the years. It started off with this lovely mustard or yellow color. We had a great project to repaint. And then we had those red chairs, and we had to paint inside and got to the new chairs, and quite a transformation over the years of what we've done inside. Uh, our first services in the building were July 2nd, 2000. We celebrated with evangelist Todd Savinsky a week of meetings, and during that week of meetings, Bob Bader was converted. He later became one of our deacons. Our average attendance, there's Bob, as I baptized him here in our baptistry. Our average attendance in 2000 was 37 people. And so that brings us then to the next milestone, when I ended missionary support with Baptist World Mission. And that coincided, that same year was our 30th anniversary when Dr. Fred Moritz came. And so we've had a long relationship with Baptist World Mission. We continue to support Baptist World Mission missionaries. Here's our dear friend, Dr. Moritz, and his wife, Judy. They're retired now, but much loved and a great part of our church ministry. Then the next, I guess, big milestone for everyone is the COVID years, 2020 and 2021. During those years, we had many funerals, and I have 6 individuals who went to be with the Lord during those years, starting with Yanni Alderleaston, then Grace Newfield and Dirk Newfield. Those 2 were amongst our originals. Norman Burgess, the original Norman, okay, Doris Harvey, and Ann Unger. And then at the end of that whole period, we lost the Gilmartin family. They moved to PEI, their PEI or bust truck. And that was that. And our attendance dropped that year down to, I think it was 28. And so it was an amazing time for everyone. and it was quite a blow. However, the attendance rebounded. If you'll notice here on this slide, the average attendance in 2022 is 50. The pastor at this time came to full-time support. We dropped the missionary support earlier, but I still was working. In fact, here's a picture, very odd picture of me as a commissionaire, my last secular job, but now we're glad to be full-time in the ministry and thankful for what God has done in our church. So that came about in 2022 when the church became fully self-supporting. Well, there have been one other blessing I'd like to mention is God's miraculous provision for the parking lot. We had this goal for years and years to have our parking lot paved. And we got an estimate. Then the city said, oh no, you need an engineer. And the price doubled. And we thought, oh no, we had the money, but we would be totally wiped out, no reserves. And the Lord sent a donation that paid for the entire parking lot. And here's the project. As it unfolded during that time, of course, our little boys were very keen on all those big machines out in the parking lot. We finally got to the paving stage. What a blessing that has been and improved our whole outlook here in the church. Big milestone in our history. So let's see here. What else do I want to talk about? I want to talk about the future. Here we are today. Our average attendance to date is about 76, over 80 in the last 4 weeks of our record keeping. And we have, how did this all happen? Well, it started with live streaming post-COVID, family events, fellowships, the weekly meal, camps, picnics, and of course, the preaching. That's the big thing about what we emphasize in our church. Finally, how did the people come to us? Well, word of mouth, families reaching families, and God's miraculous interventions. I'm going to give you a picture here. This is Khalil and Thamar's family. This is their first. These pictures are from their first Sunday at our church. They were the first really new family that came during the COVID time. And since then, God has blessed us with numerous people. I don't have everybody in here. I got all these pictures out of the church directory that Daryl has put together. And look at all these families. Many of them, a huge percentage of you, have come in the last 5 years. God has just brought you here. What a blessing it's been. And to see our church grow to where we are today. And the future, what does that mean? Well, it means committed to the Bible, committed to preaching and teaching the Bible, the Word of God, that's the center of everything, and building our fellowship around the Word of God. That's the ministry that we intend to continue in the years going forward. It gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what's happened in the last 10 years, especially, and really over the whole time of our church ministry. Thank you very much.